My name is Audrey Thompson, and I'm 34 years old. For years. I've lived a quiet life, far away from the chaos of my family. I've built a home for my daughter, Lily, a small but cozy place in Portland, and for the first time, I thought I was finally free of the shadows of the past. But, like a heavy storm cloud, my family found me again. I hadn't heard from them in over 3 years, not a word, not a text. But then, out of the blue, I received an email from my mother. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. The family reunion is happening this Christmas in Vermont. You're invited. Everyone will be there. Please come. Vermont. The place I had run from. The place where everything had gone wrong. The place that held every memory of how they had torn me apart and left me in pieces. But there was something about the invitation that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't about them. It was about Lily. She'd been asking about her grandparents, about her Uncle Derek, about the life I had tried so hard to leave behind. And in that moment, I realized she deserved to know them, deserved to see for herself what family really meant. Maybe things had changed. Maybe they had finally learned to accept me, to accept us. Or maybe it was time for me to put an end to the lies they had built around us for so long. With a heavy heart, I called Paul, my ex, a documentary filmmaker who had always been an outsider in the family. He'd seen it all, the subtle cruelty, the unspoken rules. He understood. His voice was quiet on the phone as I told him the plan. "You really want to do this? I have to. For Lily, for me." I packed our things. My daughter was practically bouncing with excitement. She was only 6. And she didn't understand the tension that ran thick through my veins. She was thrilled to meet her cousins, to play by the lake. She loved the idea of the family reunion. And for a moment, I found myself longing for the innocence she had, the hope that maybe this time it would be different. As we drove to the house, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the past pressing on me, on my chest, on my shoulders. The house, the lake house, still stood as a perfect image of everything I had left behind. The tall trees that lined the drive, the house with its grand, imposing stone pillars and the perfect lawn, trimmed just so. Everything in its place, everything immaculate. But beneath the polished surface, it was just a reminder of what it all had been. The air was cold when we arrived, sharp with that familiar chill of a winter's day. The house loomed over us, silent, watching. My heart beat faster as we pulled into the driveway, the memory of my younger self, small and unnoticed, creeping back. I wanted to shield Lily from everything, but I wasn't sure I could. Lily was excited as we walked up to the door. She was giggling, pointing out the Christmas lights on the house, chatting with Paul about what she expected from the weekend. As we reached the door, it swung open. Eleanor, my mother, stood there in her perfectly pressed linens, her hair styled just so, as if she had never left the page of some magazine. She looked me up and down, then at Lily, with warmth I hadn't seen in years. "There you are," she said, her voice soft, but her eyes gave away the tension. "We were beginning to think you'd changed your mind. Come in, come in." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat. She pulled me into a stiff hug, too polite, too rehearsed. As if she had never told me I wasn't welcome, never made me feel small my entire life. I stepped inside, and the familiar scent of cedar and fresh pine filled my lungs. The large, open space in the living room made me feel small and insignificant again. A place where my father, Howard, presided like a king over his kingdom. He stood by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey, chatting with Uncle Robert about something financial. I couldn't hear much, but I didn't need to. His voice was low, booming when it was directed at someone below him. And then there was Derek, my older brother, always the perfect son, always the golden child. He walked in, his arm casually draped around his wife, Natalie, who gave me a warm, carefully restrained smile. Derek's gaze flicked over to me, and I could already see the judgment in his eyes. "Well, well, the prodigal daughter returns," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, and with little Miss Lily, who's grown, what, a foot since I last saw her. Lily hid behind me, too shy to respond. She was just like me when I was young, timid, and quiet. But something in me refused to let her shrink. Let her be invisible, like I was forced to be. I gently nudged her forward. "Hi, Uncle Derek," she said, her voice small. The condescension in his voice was almost imperceptible, but it was there, always was. "You've grown, kid," he said, his eyes sweeping over me before settling back on his wife. Lily. Huh. Cute name. I bet it's just like your mother, wild and all over the place. We were finally led into the dining room, where the conversation picked up like a carefully rehearsed play. My father dominated the table as always, talking about business and his projects in a way that made it clear his empire was the only thing that mattered. Natalie, too, had her place in the narrative, discussing her latest advances in her career, always looking for approval from Howard. I could see it all so clearly. The same roles, the same dynamics, nothing had changed. Then, something unexpected happened, after we ate. Lily asked if she could go out to the dock to see the lake. I had no objection. I wanted her to enjoy the view of the water, something I could never fully appreciate as a child. "Uncle Derek, can I go out to the dock?" Lily asked innocently. Derek's face twisted, just for a second, before he plastered a smile back on. "No, it's cold out there. And besides, your mom and I have some catching up to do. You can stay with us for now, sweetheart." Something in his tone made me uncomfortable, but I let it slide after all. It was just another family reunion. Just another night, pretending everything was fine. That was until we heard the sound of a loud slap across the room, followed by Lily's scream. The moment I stood there, staring at Lily's tear-streaked face, time seemed to stop. Her sobs echoed in the silence of the room, and I could feel the heat rise in my chest, my blood pounding in my ears. I should have moved, should have shouted, but instead, I stood frozen, gripped by the memories that came flooding back. I knew that look from Derek, calculated, cold, with just a touch of cruelty masked by a forced smile. My father had always been the same way. Howard, my father, had always been a man of control, of power. Growing up, I'd always seen him as a tower, imposing and immovable. But now, after all these years, I could see how fragile that tower truly was. The cracks in his image were becoming painfully clear. He was a man who ruled through fear, who built his empire on the backs of those who were too afraid to speak out. And Derek was his perfect heir, the golden child who had learned well when I was young. My father had always praised Derek. He was everything I wasn't: perfectly obedient, calm under pressure, capable of keeping his mouth shut when the world was burning around him. I, on the other hand, had been the rebellious one. I had always questioned everything, always demanded to be heard, and that, in my father's eyes, was unforgivable. He'd taught me early on that silence was golden, that I should hide my true thoughts and feelings, or risk being punished. The last time I had been here, I was a broken 19-year-old, running from the nightmares that followed me everywhere. I had run away to college, to a life that I thought might be mine, free from the suffocating grip of my family. But somehow, they always managed to pull me back in, always. The same games, the same manipulation, but this time, I wasn't the same person. I had Lily now. And if there was one thing I'd learned in all those years away, it was that family could be toxic, no matter how tightly they tried to hold you. "Derek, what the hell is wrong with you?" My voice came out sharp, more forceful than I intended. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, the urge to hit him building. I could feel the old rage bubbling up, the years of silent resentment pouring to the surface. But I couldn't let that happen. Not now, not in front of Lily. I had to be calm. I had to be the parent she needed me to be. He shrugged, his smirk never wavering. "It's just a little discipline. Audrey, you remember how Mom and Dad taught us to behave?" His voice was smooth, but underneath it, There was that edge of superiority that made me want to slap him just as much as he'd slapped Lily. But I bit back my anger. I had to. I looked at Lily, who had shrunk back into Paul's arms. Her eyes were wide with confusion, fear, and a hurt that I never thought I would see in her. That was what stung the most, the knowledge that this was the first time she had ever been truly afraid in my care. I could see it in her eyes. She was asking me, silently, why I hadn't protected her. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice trembling. I kneeled down in front of her, wiping the tears from her cheeks, brushing her hair behind her ears. "You're safe. I promise. No one is going to hurt you again." I looked up at Paul, whose face mirrored my own disbelief and anger. He knew, just like I did, that this wasn't just about a slap. It was about control, about power, about a system that thrived on keeping people down. My mother stood there, her arms crossed, watching the entire scene unfold with a look of cool detachment. It was as if she had already made up her mind about what had happened, as if she had already chosen Derek's side, even without saying a word. She didn't speak, not a single word, as the situation spiraled out of control. "I think it's time we left," I said, standing up, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is not what I came back for." But before I could gather Lily and walk out, my father's voice boomed across the room. "You're not going anywhere," he snapped, his eyes narrowing with that cold, steely look I remembered all too well. "You'll stay for dinner. You'll behave like an adult, like a part of this family. You always were so dramatic, Audrey, trying to tear the family apart over nothing." I felt the weight of his words settle on me like a heavy stone. Dramatic. That was how they had always dismissed me, how they had always reduced me to nothing but an emotional wreck. They had never seen me for who I truly was, only a disappointment in their perfect little world. "I'm done with this," I said, my voice growing quieter but firmer. "I'm done with all of you. You don't get to treat me like this anymore. And you don't get to treat my daughter like this either." For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. It wasn't anger or rage that fueled me, but something stronger: resolve. I wasn't that lost 19-year-old anymore. I had found my purpose, my voice, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me again. I turned to Paul, who was already standing, his camera forgotten in the corner, his eyes full of sympathy for Lily. But there was something else there, too understanding. He had always been the one to remind me that family wasn't just about blood. Family was about those who chose you, who saw you for who you truly were. And that, in that moment, was something I was choosing for myself. "Let's go," I said, my voice steady, though it trembled with emotion. Paul nodded, and I could feel his support behind me. He had always known the truth, had always stood by me when my family hadn't. And now, as we walked out of that house, out of that life, there was no turning back. As we stepped out onto the porch, I could hear the sounds of my family behind us, their voices growing louder as they tried to assert control over the situation. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter, because for the first time in years, I felt free. We left the house in silence, the snow crunching underfoot as we walked to the car. The bitter cold wrapped around me. But it didn't feel like the kind of cold I could escape. It was the kind of cold that gnawed at your bones, seeped into your skin, and refused to let go. I glanced at Lily, who was sitting quietly in the back seat, her eyes wide and confused. She didn't understand what had just happened, why her uncle, her family, had slapped her. How could I explain to her that the people who should love and protect her were the same ones who would hurt her? It was a question I'd been asking myself for years. The drive back to the small cabin we had rented was agonizingly quiet. Paul, ever the silent observer, didn't ask questions. He never did. He just let me process, let me breathe, and for that, I was thankful, but I knew that at some point, we'd have to talk about everything. When we finally got to the cabin, I locked the door behind us, the sound of the bolt slipping into place strangely comforting. It was a small, humble place, a far cry from the mansion I had just left behind. But for me, it felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could gather my thoughts and decide what to do next. As I sat on the couch, I pulled Lily close to me. She had her head on my shoulder, her tiny hands clutching the hem of my sweater. I could feel her shivering, though not from the cold. It was something deeper, something more profound. I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "It's okay, baby, we're safe now." But were we? I didn't know anymore. I wasn't just fighting my family. I was fighting a system, a belief system that had been ingrained in me for my entire life. A system that taught me to shut up, to take it, and to pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. I had let my family control me for far too long, and I had let it control Lily too. I stood up and paced the room, my mind racing. Derek, my father, and even Eleanor, all of them had manipulated me, twisted my memories, and gaslighted me into thinking that I was the one who was wrong. But I wasn't wrong. I had to stop letting them convince me that my feelings didn't matter, that my voice didn't matter. It was time to take back control. It was time to make them see me. It was time to make them see Lily. I took out my phone and dialed Marissa Grant, a lawyer I had met years ago in college. She had been one of the few people who had stood by me when I needed someone to believe in me. I had lost touch with her over the years, but I knew that now, more than ever. I needed her expertise. When she picked up, her voice was warm but concerned. "Audrey, is everything okay? You sound—" She paused, rushed. I took a deep breath. "I need your help. It's time I finally confront them, my family, my father, everything. I need to take legal action." There was a pause on the other end, and then she spoke again, her voice firm and calm. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "Absolutely," I replied, feeling a sense of certainty I hadn't felt before. "I need you to help me build a case against them, against Derek, against Howard, against all of them." Marissa sighed, the sound heavy with understanding. "You know this won't be easy, right? Taking on your family, especially the way they've been running things, it's going to be a battle." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "But it's a battle I'm ready to fight. I won't let them hurt Lily the way they hurt me." She was silent for a moment. "I'll help you." "Audrey, but you need to be prepared. There will be consequences, not just for them, but for you too. Are you ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. "I am." We agreed to meet the next day to go over everything. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The fight wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Lily, and the future I wanted for her. A future where she wouldn't have to be afraid. A future where she could be herself without anyone trying to tear her down. The next day, Paul and I sat in the small cabin, discussing what we needed to do next. He had been quiet, his usual calm demeanor giving me the space I needed. But I knew he had his own thoughts, his own feelings about what had happened. He wasn't just an observer in this. He had become part of my fight, part of my plan. "It's time," I said, standing up from the couch and walking to the small desk in the corner. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to George Tierney, the family lawyer who had handled my grandfather's estate. I needed to get access to the original will, the will my father had likely altered. As I typed, I couldn't help but think about how long I had been hiding, how long I had allowed them to control me, to manipulate me. No more. I was done. I sent the email, then looked at Paul, who was now standing next to me. "I'm doing this. We're going to bring them down, all of them." Paul nodded, his expression hardening. "They've had their chance. They're not going to walk away from this one." There was a fire in his eyes, a fire that matched the one in mine. Together, we would do this. By the time Marissa arrived, I had already started gathering everything I could find: emails, photos, old documents, anything that could help me make my case. As we sat down, I watched her scan everything with a critical eye. She wasn't just looking for weaknesses. She was looking for angles, for ways to twist the truth in my favor. "Let's start with Derek," she said, leaning forward. "What exactly happened with him?" I took a deep breath, gathering the fragments of the memory I had tried to bury. Derek has always been the golden child, the perfect son. But he's also always had a sense of entitlement. He's always been the one to manipulate our parents into giving him everything. He's always been the one who gets away with everything. And the slap, Marissa asked, her voice low but deliberate. That was just the beginning, I replied, my voice hardening. He's been controlling me, manipulating me for years. But now, he's gone too far. He hit Lily, and I'm not going to let that slide. She nodded, taking notes. Good. We'll build the case from there. I took a deep breath before opening the door. There was no surprise, no shock on my face. Derek knew exactly what he was doing. He stood there, dressed impeccably in his tailored suit, his presence as imposing as ever. His sharp eyes scanned me up and down, and for a brief moment, it felt as if he were assessing me like a piece of property. I could feel the old dynamic between us, the sibling rivalry, the years of him looking down on me, trying to diminish me. You're really going through with this, aren't you? Derek's voice was low, smooth, almost condescending as he spoke, but I could detect the subtle edge of something. Was it anger, fear? Maybe a little bit of both. I crossed my arms, holding his gaze steadily. I've had enough of your games. Derek, enough of all of you. It ends now. He raised an eyebrow, a smile curling at the corner of his lips. You always were the emotional one. Audrey, can't you just let things go for once? I shook my head, not giving in. No, not anymore. You've gone too far this time. You hit Lily, my daughter. You think that's something I'll just forget. The words came out sharper than I expected, but I couldn't stop them now. I couldn't stop the surge of anger that coursed through me, or the sense of betrayal that was eating me from the inside. Derek stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You're overreacting. It was just a little discipline. Audrey, I'm helping you, teaching her the rules. She needs to learn respect. I felt a cold chill wash over me, but I didn't back down. That's not discipline, that's abuse. And I won't stand for it. Not for me, and not for Lily. My voice was steady, but inside, a storm was brewing. I had been silent for so long, but in that moment, the silence broke. It was like a dam had burst. And now, everything I had buried was flooding out. Derek chuckled, almost mockingly, as if this was all just a joke to him. You're still the same, aren't you? Always jumping to conclusions. Always the drama queen. You think you can fight me? Fight this! He waved his hand dismissively around the room, as if to encompass everything the house, the family, the power they had over me. I don't need to fight you, Derek, I said, my voice growing calmer but more determined. I've already won. I stepped aside and gestured for him to enter, but he didn't move. What are you talking about? His tone shifted, his earlier confidence faltering just a bit. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stepped over to the table where I had laid out a stack of documents, photos, and legal papers. I had been preparing for this moment for days, gathering evidence and information, each piece carefully placed in front of me like a puzzle I was finally completing. When I turned back to face Derek, I could see a flicker of unease in his eyes. The wall he had built around himself was cracking. These are the copies of the will, I said, picking up the first document, the real will, not the one you edited behind closed doors. You didn't think I'd find out, did you? You didn't think I'd dig deep enough to uncover the truth? But I did, and now I have the proof. Derek's expression shifted, the smile dropping from his face. You think you can just walk in here, make accusations, and win? His voice was rising now, tinged with the anger he could no longer hide. You don't have the power to change anything. Audrey, I placed the documents down carefully, taking a step back. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm trying to reveal everything. What you've done to me, to our family, to Lily. He took a step forward, his eyes blazing. You're making a huge mistake. No. Derek, I said, my voice steady. The mistake was giving you the power to begin with. The mistake was believing that everything you did was justified. It's not. I was close now, closer than I had ever been before. All those years of fear, all those years of trying to appease him, trying to be the daughter he wanted me to be, none of that mattered anymore. The truth was on the table now, laid bare for him to see. And in that moment, I realized something that I had never allowed myself to understand before he was afraid. Derek took another step toward me, his hand raised. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Not for him. Not for anyone. You think you've won, but you haven't. He spat. This is my family. I control everything here. You're just a footnote. I didn't flinch. I didn't show fear. Instead, I looked him in the eye, coldly, without emotion. Not anymore. You've lost control. You don't control me. Derek. And you sure as hell don't control Lily. For a moment, there was silence. Derek stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes narrowing as if weighing his next move. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words never came. Instead, he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him with such force that the entire cabin seemed to shake. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door. It wasn't the victory I had imagined. It wasn't the grand confrontation, the epic showdown I had dreamed of for so long. It was quiet. It was simple, but it was real. And it felt damn good. But even as I stood there, still absorbing what had just happened, I knew this wasn't the end. Derek would fight back. My family would fight back. The world they had built would crumble, piece by piece. And they would stop at nothing to protect what they believed was theirs. I walked over to the table, where the legal papers were spread out. I picked up the original will. The document that had been altered, the will that my father had secretly changed without my knowledge. My fingers trembled slightly as I ran my hand over the signature, feeling the weight of the betrayal in the ink. I had all the proof now. I had all the ammunition I needed to take them down. But it wasn't just about the will. It wasn't just about the money or the estate. It was about everything they had taken from me. The way they had manipulated me. Made me feel small, unimportant, as if my thoughts didn't matter. My voice didn't matter. They had never seen me as anything more than a tool, someone to mold, someone to control. But not anymore. I could see the hesitation in Natalie's eyes as she stood in the doorway, her body language betraying her unease. She wasn't the woman I had imagined coming through that door, not a fierce ally of Derek's, not a cold defender of the status quo. Instead, she looked fragile, vulnerable, as if the weight of the situation had finally broken her composure. I had never seen her like this. What do you want? Natalie, I asked, my voice steady but edged with disbelief. I wasn't sure if I was more surprised by her presence or by the fact that she had come here, to my cabin, after everything that had happened. She closed the door behind her softly, the click of the lock echoing in the quiet room. She took a few steps toward me, her eyes never leaving mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and the silence between us felt thick, suffocating. Finally, she broke it, her voice low and hesitant. I never thought it would come to this, she began, her words hanging in the air like a confession she had been holding on to for far too long. I didn't think you'd go this far. Audrey, I didn't think I'd have to choose. I raised an eyebrow. Choose? What are you talking about? Natalie took another step forward, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them in front of her. Derek, he's dangerous. Audrey, not just to you, but to everyone. I've seen it. I've witnessed it for years. And I've been too afraid to do anything. But now it's too late. I've let it go on for too long. I stood frozen, absorbing her words. Derek dangerous. Was this some kind of last-minute attempt to salvage her conscience? I wasn't sure if I should trust her, if she was genuinely trying to help, or if this was just another manipulation to buy herself some redemption. But her next words struck me to my core. I never wanted to marry him. I was forced into it. You don't know this. But Derek has always had leverage over me. over all of us. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to piece together what she was saying. Leverage. What do you mean? She swallowed hard, the tension in her jaw evident as she looked away for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When I was young, before I met Derek, I was in a relationship with someone else, someone who was real. But Derek found out. He threatened to destroy everything, my career, my reputation, everything I worked for. He told me that if I didn't marry him, he would expose it. I didn't have a choice. I felt a sickening knot twist in my stomach as her words sank in. I had always seen Natalie as a strong woman, capable and independent, but now I saw how deeply she had been entangled in Derek's web, how much of her own life he had manipulated. So, you married him out of fear all these years. You've been trapped. She nodded, her face filled with a sorrow that mirrored my own pain. I thought I could handle it. Audrey, I thought I could play the part, keep the peace. But over the years, it just got worse. He changed. He became more controlling, more cruel. And I just stayed silent. I kept my head down. I told myself it was the price I had to pay. I could feel the weight of her confession in the pit of my stomach. The truth of it, so raw, so powerful. Natalie, the woman who had always seemed so composed, had been living in a prison of her own. But her silence had enabled Derek's behavior, and that truth stung just as much as everything else. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "Why now? After everything?" Her gaze flickered to the papers, scattered on the table the evidence. The proof I had gathered to take Derek and the family down. She sighed, almost defeated, "Because I can't stay silent anymore. Audrey, I can't keep covering for him, not after what he did to Lily, not after how he treated you, and how he's going to destroy this family if no one stops him." A sense of clarity began to settle over me as I listened to her. It was no longer about me fighting them. It was no longer just about reclaiming my own dignity or taking back control. This was bigger. This was about stopping a cycle of abuse, of manipulation, that had been passed down through generations. And now, it was time to break it. I took a step closer to her. "What do you want from me?" "Natalie, you want me to feel sorry for you. You want me to forgive you for standing by all these years, enabling him." She flinched at my words, but I wasn't done. "You don't get to come here, after all of this, and ask for my forgiveness. You don't get to pretend you didn't see what Derek did to me and still sit by his side." I saw the tears welling up in her eyes as she reached out, as if she were trying to make me understand. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking you to help me, Audrey. Help me fix this. Help me stop him before it's too late." I was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Could I trust her? Was this genuine, or was it just another game? But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that Derek had to be stopped. And if Natalie was willing to help, if she was finally ready to take a stand, I couldn't turn my back on that. "You'll help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she were afraid to hope. I nodded slowly, my decision made. "I'll help you, but you have to understand, this isn't going to be easy. I'm taking down everything he's built, and you'll have to choose sides, Natalie. There's no going back after this." Her breath caught in her throat. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll help you take him down." We spent the next few hours making plans, preparing the legal documents, gathering the evidence, and coordinating how we would confront Derek and the rest of the family. But as we worked, a heavy sense of impending confrontation loomed over us. I knew that once the pieces were set into motion, there was no stopping this. The walls of my family's empire were about to fall, and none of us were going to be the same after it. As the night wore on, I felt a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. I had started this journey alone, but now, with Natalie at my side, it felt like I was finally standing on solid ground. But there was one final obstacle, Derek. I knew he wouldn't give up without a fight. He was going to push back harder than ever before, but I was ready. I had to be. The phone call hung in the air long after the line went dead. My heart was hammering in my chest, my breath shallow, as I tried to process the chilling words that echoed in my ears. This isn't over. Audrey. Not by a long shot. Derek. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He knew. Somehow. He had found out about the evidence, about the plans to take him down. The game had changed. He wasn't going to let me destroy everything he had built. He was going to fight back. And he would fight dirty. I stood in the dimly lit room, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. Every part of me screamed to take action, to pick up the phone and call Marissa, to tell her that the clock was ticking and we had no time to waste. But the air felt thick with tension. It wasn't just about the will anymore. It wasn't just about the family legacy. This had become personal. Derek had made it personal the moment he laid his hands on Lily. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. The plan had always been to take Derek and my family down by the book through legal means, with the evidence and the truth on our side. But now, as I stood there in the quiet of the cabin, I realized that truth alone wasn't going to be enough. Derek would manipulate the system, twist the facts, and use every connection he had to turn this against me. It was time to think bigger, smarter. I looked at Natalie, who had been standing in the corner, silently watching me process everything. She was no longer the quiet, complicit woman I had once known. The fear in her eyes had shifted into something else resolve. She knew what this fight would cost, and she was ready to see it through. She stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with an undertone of urgency. "What's the plan?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for answers. "What do we do now?" I turned toward her, my mind racing. There was no turning back now. Derek had made his move, and he had just made this war personal. I couldn't afford to play by the rules anymore. It was time for strategy, for deception, and for precision. "We need to hit him where it hurts," I said, my voice low but certain. "We need to expose him, publicly. He's always hidden behind the family name, behind the wealth, behind the power. But he's been operating outside the law for too long. It's time to tear down his empire piece by piece." Natalie's eyes widened, a flicker of something like fear crossing her face. "Are you sure? I mean, this could destroy everything. Everyone." I didn't flinch. "Good," I said firmly. "Let it. It's time someone paid for the years of manipulation, the lies and the abuse. The public needs to know who he really is." I grabbed my phone and dialed Marissa. Her voice came through immediately, calm and collected as always. "Audrey, what's happening?" she asked, sensing the urgency in my tone. "It's happening now," I said. "We've lost the element of surprise. Derek knows. He's going to fight back. We need to go public, and we need to hit him with everything we've got." Marissa didn't hesitate. "I'll get the media teams on it. We'll leak the evidence, all of it. We need to go to the press, make him face the truth. But we need to do it carefully. If we do this wrong, it could backfire." I nodded, already formulating the plan in my head. "I'm sending you everything: photos, documents, recordings, the works. I want him exposed for what he is. We'll take down his empire, one piece at a time." We spent the next few hours preparing. Natalie and I worked together to compile everything we had: old emails, incriminating texts, financial records showing Derek's manipulation of the family assets. There were documents that proved his illegal dealings, false signatures on the wills, and a trail of corruption that led all the way to the top. It was more than just personal betrayal now. It was a legal war. As I sifted through the final stack of papers, my hands trembling slightly, I couldn't help but think about Lily. What would this do to her? What would this do to me? Could I really bring down my own family, tear apart everything they had built? But then I thought about the slap, the way Derek had treated Lily like she was nothing more than a pawn in his game. I thought about all the years I had spent living in silence, Playing their game. And for what? To protect a family that never cared about me. A family that wouldn't protect my daughter. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to make them pay, not just for me, but for Lily. I looked up at Natalie, who was sitting across from me, her face pale but determined. "You ready for this?" I asked, my voice low. "Steady?" She nodded. "I'm ready, whatever it takes." I took a deep breath. "Then let's finish this." We went straight to work. We leaked the information to the press, ensuring it would hit every major outlet. The world would know who Derek really was, and the rest of the family would be forced to face the consequences of their actions. By the time we were finished, it felt like the storm had already arrived. The phone calls started coming in, journalists wanting to know more, private investigators confirming the details, and even calls from law enforcement asking for further documentation. The snowball was rolling, and there was no way to stop it now. But as the press conference loomed closer, as the truth began to surface, I knew there was one final battle to fight. Derek wouldn't go down without a fight. He never did. And I wasn't going to let him escape this time. The day before the public announcement, Derek showed up at my cabin again. This time, he didn't come alone. He was flanked by his lawyer, George Tierney, the same man who had helped him alter the will. I could see it. In Derek's eyes, he was desperate. He was clinging to whatever power he had left, trying to salvage his empire before it all came crashing down. "This is your last chance." "Audrey," Derek said, his voice cold and calculating, "you think you've won? You're making a huge mistake." I stood in front of him, my back straight, my eyes hard. "You don't get to scare me anymore. Derek, this isn't a game. And this time, I'm not backing down." He smiled then, but it wasn't a smile of victory. It was the smile of a man who knew the fight was lost, but who would burn everything to the ground before he let someone else win. "You'll regret this, Audrey." His voice was low, almost a growl. "I promise you, you'll regret it." The night before the press conference, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's face, his smirk, the way he thought he could control everything. He always believed he was invincible, that no one could touch him. But now, he was about to learn the hard way that the power he'd built was fragile, built on lies and deceit. I could feel it. The moment of reckoning was coming, and I was ready. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. I had a few hours before the world would know everything. My phone buzzed on the table, but I didn't look at it. I didn't need to know who was calling. It was time to focus, time to make the final push. Lily was still asleep, a peaceful expression on her face, unaware of the storm that was about to break. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and kissed her gently on the cheek. This was for her. For the future I was going to build, where she wouldn't have to fear the very people who were supposed to love her. I couldn't let them break her like they had broken me. I dressed quickly, my hands steady now. There was no more fear, no more doubt. I had made my choice, and it was time to take control. Natalie was waiting for me outside. She had come through helping me gather all the evidence, making the connections, and ensuring everything was in place. Her face was a mask of determination, but I could see the traces of her own inner turmoil. She had to confront the family she had been complicit in protecting, and the cost of that was clear in her eyes. We didn't speak much as we drove to the press conference. There was no need for words. We both knew what had to happen. We were on the cusp of something big, something that would tear apart the walls of the world Derek had built. The truth was coming for him. When we arrived at the venue, the tension in the air was palpable. The room was filled with reporters, photographers, and media personnel, all waiting for the big reveal. There was a hum of anticipation, but none of them knew what was coming. They didn't know that the story they were about to hear would change everything. I stood at the podium, my hand gripping the sides, as I looked out at the sea of faces. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for. The moment that would shake my family to its core. I could feel Marissa standing just behind me, a quiet presence, making sure everything was legally sound. I had to stay focused. The press were eager, ready to ask questions. They knew something big was about to drop, but they had no idea how much of a storm they were walking into. I cleared my throat and spoke, my voice steady. Thank you all for being here today. What I'm about to reveal is not just the end of a family legacy. It's the beginning of something more important, the truth. I let those words settle before I continued. The cameras flashed. The room fell silent. The weight of the moment was heavy. But I stood tall, steady, ready to face it all. For years, my family has hidden behind the walls of their wealth, their influence, their power. I said, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. They've manipulated, controlled, and destroyed the lives of those who stood in their way. They used their name, their position to get away with everything. I paused, letting the reporters digest the gravity of what I was saying. I am Audrey Thompson, and I am here to tell you the truth about my family, the truth about Derek Walsh, the man who has built his empire on lies, manipulation, and abuse. The reporters gasped, murmurs spreading through the crowd. But I wasn't finished. This was just the beginning. For years, Derek and my father, Howard, have controlled every aspect of our family's business. The Walsh estate, they made decisions based on their greed, their egos. But they also made decisions that hurt people like me, people like Lily, my daughter, people who are now paying the price for their manipulation. I turned slightly, looking at the screen behind me, the images of the forged wills, the financial records, the incriminating texts, all of it flashed across the screen for the world to see. The room went still. The evidence was undeniable. This is not just a family dispute. I continued, my voice steady, almost detached now. This is about accountability, about making sure that those who hurt others face the consequences of their actions. I watched as the reporters began to whisper among themselves, their pens flying across notebooks, their fingers clicking on keyboards as they began writing down everything. The media was already reacting. The story was spreading. But there was still more to come. The room was waiting for the bombshell, and I wasn't done yet. There is more, I said, my voice growing colder. Not only has Derek manipulated the family finances, but he's also been involved in a series of illegal activities that I can prove. Money laundering, fraud, illegal dealings with offshore accounts, all of it hidden behind the name of our family. The shock in the room was palpable now. The reporters were leaning forward, hanging on my every word. The truth was no longer just a whisper. It was loud, undeniable, and it was about to shake everything Derek had worked for. I have all the evidence, I said, holding up the documents, everything he's done, and everything he's tried to hide. At that moment, I could feel Derek's presence. Even though he wasn't physically there, he was watching, waiting. But he wasn't going to stop me now. The press conference ended in a whirlwind. Reporters rushed to interview me, to ask for more details. The world was watching, and there was no going back. Derek had been exposed, and he would have to face the consequences of his actions. As I walked out of the room, I felt a strange sense of liberation. It wasn't just the truth that had set me free. It was the fact that I had finally taken control of my own destiny. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my family's lies, but now I was standing in the light. The days that followed the press conference felt like a blur, but the truth was finally out there. Derek had been exposed, his empire of lies, his manipulations, and his corrupt dealings, all laid bare for the world to see. The press had picked up the story, and the media storm that followed was relentless. It was a war I had won, but it wasn't without consequences. The fallout was just beginning. Derek didn't disappear quietly. The moment the story hit, he went into full damage control mode. His lawyers, his connections, his carefully constructed world of wealth and power, everything began to unravel. But the hardest part was yet to come. I had taken down the man who had controlled me for so long, the man who had made me feel small and insignificant. I had exposed him for who he truly was. But it didn't feel like victory, not entirely. The night after the press conference, I sat in the cabin, looking out over the darkened lake. The world was still, the only sound the gentle rustling of the trees in the wind. Lily was asleep, safe and sound, and for the first time in years. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders, but there was still that nagging feeling, a sense of unfinished business. It was more than just taking down Derek. It was about rebuilding what he had broken, rebuilding myself. As I sat there, the phone rang again, a name flashing across the screen. Marissa. I answered, my heart still racing from the adrenaline of the past few days. Audrey? Marissa's voice came through, steady as always. We've got them. Derek's assets are frozen. The authorities have started their investigation into the fraud. And the media's already tearing apart his reputation. It's over. He's done. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. I thought it would feel like more, I said softly, almost to myself. You've just exposed a whole system of corruption, Audrey. You've taken down a man who's built an empire on lies and abuse. That is a victory. You've won, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words sink in. Marissa was right. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure that no one, not even family, could walk all over you and think there were no consequences. The journey had been long, but I was finally free. We were free. As I hung up, I looked over at Lily, asleep in her bed, her tiny form curled up peacefully under the covers. This was for her, all of it. The fight, the struggle, the sacrifices, so that she could grow up in a world where she would never have to feel the weight of someone else's control, where she would always know her worth. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the dark water, the reflections of the trees and sky barely visible. The night was silent, but there was a strange sense of peace, a sense that the storm had passed and a new chapter had begun. I had done what I set out to do, but I wasn't done yet. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Rebuilding would take time. Healing would take time. But I was no longer afraid of what the future held. I had faced my past and come out the other side stronger. And most importantly, I had found my voice. Sometimes, the greatest battles are the ones we fight not for ourselves, but for those we love. Audrey's journey wasn't just about taking down her family. It was about standing up to the systems that try to hold us down. It's about reclaiming our lives from the shadows of others' control, and about the strength it takes to rise above the pain and rebuild from the wreckage.